I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe?
Fresh off the masses, the brand new cancerous growth, who has come here to vie for your vote. Come here to cry at the camps and to mourn at the shore for the bodies that float by the wreck of an immigrant boat. Then it's back to their luxury home, couple security booths and a moat, couple cigars, little escargot, little booze and a soak. Just breathe in the steam and the smoke. Pink salt, lavender, candles are low. Shit, when you do what you do, gotta lighten the load. And he got a life of his own that's a sight to behold. And it's a lot to control, to decipher the code or to siphon the soul. The cost of a good night's sleep for the working elite is a bargain, no matter the toll. Worth any wager, and that comes straight from the mouth of the means to the goal that will swallow us whole. Ripe for the picking if you don't mind mold, and you know I don't. Maybe we're pleasantly prone, maybe we're taking a licking, compliantly ticking and ticking and ticking, but never explode. No, I don't deliver the prettiest image, but damn if it isn't an accurate vision of natural fission, of rage at the system and abject heartbreak, patiently waiting for any who'll listen. That little blue bird who was watching your words is a federal carrier pigeon, a Langley first. It's a patient observer who hears what it wants and is trained for the worst. Oh, you got nothing to hide. They'll be the ones to decide that after they root through your purse, after they read all your text, after they raid your apartment, confiscate all of its contents, then conjure up evidence out of the air on a wing and a prayer and malicious intelligence nonsense. Any presumption of innocence long since gone, right along with your comforts and constants. Historically first they will come for the communists. So why in the fuck would I say I'm a communist? Well, it might be I love my community more than the monsters of opulence who are holding us hostage, who are vomiting promises. Might be I'm all done seeing our pensions and benefits harvested. Might be I'm all done watching the populace being disarmed in the guise of an armistice. Watching a woman collapse on the floor who will rise no more. She is wheeled out the door and you're next in line for the pharmacist. If you can get me to vote, it's a hard no confidence. But part of the charm of deception is politics wearing the mask of incompetence. It's all in the art of austerity, darling. It's all in the slide of the providence. Until home is as wide as your cubicle height and is only as deep as your coffin is. Maybe I'm miles away from impatience, aching to break off the head of the snake where the capital lust, reptile brain, and the margin of profit is. Like off with his. Like off with his.
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, were you save. You can't keep giving us nothing and think we're bluffing about coming for your heads. Why play civil if you won't listen to 50,000 dead? Now we know our mission, we form a militia, make Congress a prison. Why play civil when all these dead won't make you listen?
What's more American than slaying your oppressors? What's more American than liberty or death first? Man, I thought we were founded on abolishing the tyranny of those who would starve a village all to live empirically. And I regret that I have only one life to give for my cause, now that I can see the cause so clearly. I want our leaders, regardless of party, to fear me. I will pick my targets and assassinate them lyrically. I will bring them out into the town square, hook them to the pillory and leave them there. Hillary, I'll see you there. Hillary, I'll see you there.
You can't keep giving us nothing and think we're bluffing about coming for your heads. Why play civil if you won't listen to 50,000 dead? Now we know our mission, we form a militia, make Congress a prison. Why play civil when all these dead won't make you listen?
Welcome to the fantasy of rhetoric. Welcome to the last of the free speech while we can get it. And I promise you can get it. All you corporate Democrats, second wave Confederates, GOP illusionists, and neo-Nazi bureaucrats. And Stephen fucking Miller, I will see you in the aftermath. When all the laws are dust, there's just moral justice after that. And I will hunt you through the wasteland if it comes to that. So I can rub you in the dirt like a cheap human Brillo pad. I can sleep fine when our beds are burning, Stephen, but I'll turn around and run into the blaze to get my pillow back. As long as I can lay my head down, I can live with that. I can deal with a little ash. I can feel like a little of the old me burn with the bed and the rest of my past. The old world where we all lived and we can't get back. The old world where you didn't give and you'd still get back. Where you could rake in 12 billion and give none back. Those days are behind us, the virus will kill all that. Your wealth is behind us and kindness is meant for the past. Our leaders would bind us and starve us and call it a fast. A sacrament meant for their God that they garnish in cash. And they feed it the poor by the hundreds, that's all that it asks. Its hunger is legion and people in need are all it will have. So our only chance is to starve it and hope that it turns on them.
You can't keep giving us nothing and think we're bluffing about coming for your heads. Can't keep giving us nothing and think we're bluffing about coming for your heads. La da 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 la da 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 la da da da.
Last stand, and I came to deliver. Been called a Clinton operative, a Russian, and a grifter. By libs, a washing student debt, proud to be an intern, sucking up to pigs who get a tax cut in the midterms. You cut the ties but never heal the wrist burns. Capitalist shackles wrap and penetrate like ringworms around the necks of those whose deaths will not affect the king's purse or the coffers of the company the king serves, who manufacture mandated tinctures. Their safety data hanging from a fixture, half a mile skyward, just dangling from the rafters. My grift is sobbing till I'm cackling with laughter. I guess I would've made a decent actor. I'd be great at crying on command until they cut plus 40 minutes after. When the director waves a hand, it ain't a rap, it's now a legal matter. Honey, my grift is weeping on a mic until I'm hacking up airstrike verses like it's bombs away and batter up. Swinging on these bigots, they keep killing us to fatten up. Kill the switch, eat the rich, I think they're finally fat enough. Grab your knife and fork, the world is yours, just say you've had enough. And if you're comfy, you could go ahead and laugh it up. Tell me how the most important vote I'll ever cast is like the choosing of a bus, in that it might not take you anywhere you want, but no one can deny the fact the bus is now no longer where it was. And that's the kind of progress we should celebrate and trust. Spoken like a kid who never took a bus. Spoken like a piece of shit that used some cash to mask his stink and truly thinks he's one of us. Spoken like a terminally unserious person who equates our cries for rights to mixed up orders from a server. It paints a privileged picture of what you would label urgent if the worst thing you've experienced in life has been the time your waiter accidentally brought a tray of gold flake scallop when you clearly ordered gold flake urchin. And now you're storming out the restaurant and hopping in a Tesla. You got 80 pounds of Tony Fauci merchant.
Rewind 2 chains won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride. Rewind 2 chains won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride.
Who are these people?
Who are these people? Hey, everybody, we're back. Hi, it's Indy here. I got Reef sitting next to me like usual. What's going on? It's How Do We Miss That? It's Sunday night. It's INN. You know it. You're here. Hopefully you're watching. And even if you're watching on the replay, thank you. Appreciate you doing that, because like half the people that watch it when we're not live. So thank you for doing that as well. What a week, huh? What a crazy week. Donald Trump did not kill himself. Well, let's start with that. Because he's talking a lot of smack about a lot of people that the people that seem to do that don't seem to survive very long. So we've got to look out for the people that get off by Israel, because that's what's going on here. There's going to be a very long Fuck Israel segment this week. There's quite a bit happening there. Went to some of the best Indie Media Award honoree sources. And it's been a hell of a week for INN, even with Colin being out. We had a one-on-one with Descent in Bloom, who may or may not be in chat right now. Hi, if you are here. If not, good to see you. We'll be covering one of her articles later. We're going to talk about, we haven't talked about Alan McLeod and a Mint Press story in a while. He did a story about Apple employees working for the former IDF employees from Unit 8200. And so we're going to talk about that. I have not seen very many people talk about that yet. And the craziness continues in the UK, man. Now, last week we did a story from our friend Gordon Dimmack where he announced that he was going to be turning himself in. So we're going to have a conclusion to that story, because he did do as he promised, and he went to a police station and he reported on what happened. So that is what we're going to do for the show. We got a quick little lightning round 2 set up, and then we're going to get out of here. We'll get to boats, smashing into other boats, but I tried to find some stories that weren't necessarily being talked about as much. I was looking at some of the other rundowns from the other shows, and I don't think that any of them really were talking about what we were tonight, so that made me feel good. And that's the reason why we do what we do, is because we try to talk about the things that everybody else isn't talking about. We're not chasing algorithms. We're not chasing keywords and clicks. We're here to get the real story and to inform people and to talk about the stuff that the algorithm does not want talked about, which is why they're pushing those keywords, by the way. They're pushing those keywords because they want that topic talked about to distract from the topics that we're going to talk about. So if you are able to and of means, please support the media you want to see. That is our wall of fame. Those are the people that have helped INN already and reached into their pockets and gave a couple of bucks. The best ways that you can do that, if you want to be on that board, is to go to Cash App, $ Indie News Network. That works. Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. PayPal.me/Indie News Network. Then you've got the Substacks, INNnewsletter.com and IndieMediaToday.com, where we are actually live right now, hopefully. And then we've got INNnewsletter.com and then IndieNewsNow.com. That's the other one. That's the website that I built to host the news, to have a large continuous feed, but there's also a feed of INN Live. So you can watch us live, ad-free, platform-free, anywhere you want. Go to IndieNewsNow.com, IndieNewsNow.com/live, and you'll be able to watch us live whenever we are. All right. Dude, you've been off like all week. Have we seen you?
Mm-hmm.
Where?
Yeah.
Have you?
You definitely have.
Well, I know I've seen you, but has anybody else? Like, you've been kind of
Probably not.
in a hole, with Colin being out, and I think the last time they saw you was boats smashing into other boats last week. So what's up?
Yeah. I don't know. Stuff and things.
What'd you do with your week off?
You know? I worked out. Does that count? I'm prepping stuff for our renewal when we come back. You know?
Nice. We watched fights last night. Dude, that was a killer main event. Poirier and Max Holloway. Wow.
Yep.
That was a great fight. A lot of fun to watch. All right, so we are going to get started with our first story here. Let me. Oh, I did not do the thing. You don't have to ask. I remembered. I need to share my screen. That would help. Yep. All right, so we're doing
what
that.
episode are we doing? How many times have you forgotten that?
Oh, that's a good question. What episode is this? This is episode 169. What? That was a delay. There we go. 169. Thank you. Yes. I'm still figuring this thing out, I guess. That's what we've all learned.
Yeah.
Is that I'm still flying without a net when it comes to engineering. All right. So we have talked about the voting machine certification. Don't tune out, please, because this is a really important story. It may have some technical stuff, but it's fucking corrupt as hell. And that's the reason why I'm bringing this. It's incredible how corrupt our voting machine software and our process of voting is. Everybody says, vote harder. We don't here. You know that. You know that we are anti-federal electoralism. And this is a large reason why. It's because... Go ahead.
Any electoralism, sir.
Well, specifically at the federal level. No, at the federal level, because school board does make a difference. Okay, well, I know that school boards do make a difference.
You don't, but continue.
Great. So, voting machine certification software and software certification. We've talked about this in the past, that it's basically done by 2 testing labs throughout the country, one of which is called ProV&V. ProV&V is owned by a man named Jack Cobb, who has spent decades in this industry, quote unquote, which is interesting because before 2000, there was no voting machine industry. But because of the hanging chads and the bullshit that happened with the Bush-Gore election back in 2000, we got this Help America Vote Act, the HAVA. And with HAVA, we got machines that helped us vote. And with machines, that came software and private proprietary companies. Now, these private proprietary companies, they don't want their code publicly audited. So therefore, they give their code to a testing lab to then test the software and to test the changes to make sure that they're not impactful, because software gets updated, they put patches and they put updates out over time because they catch vulnerabilities or there are new additions or whatever. So as a software company, they have been putting out patches, and they rely on one of these two testing labs to certify the vote. Pro V&V, again, with this guy, Jack Cobb, is one of them. And we have been talking about him for a couple of weeks because not only does he run a lab, but that lab sits in a building in a research park that is one of the most invested in military intelligence research parks, where there's a ton of things happening for the military in Alabama. Number one, he owns not just the office, but the entire building, which houses defense contractors. There's a major conflict of interest there. But now our friend Descent Bloom, she found something even more concerning here, was that this guy had no authority to certify machines. But even worse, that the machine companies themselves, and this guy admits that the testing software that he's getting from the machine companies, from ES&S and Dominion and Smart Tech, that they're providing the testing software. So they're providing the update, the patch, but they're also giving you the test with which the software with which to test it. That's a complete conflict of interest. Like, it's impossible. So I'm gonna start here. So every machine that Jack Cobb had certified after 2017 should have been pulled, and they weren't. It's insane. The EAC, which is a totally corrupt bureau, has looked the other way. So like she says, for years, Jack Cobb's voting systems test lab, Pro V&V, certified nearly half of the voting machines used in U.S. elections, knowing that his lab's federal accreditation had quietly expired in 2017. Well, that's just a formality, right? When someone asked a state official for proof if it was still valid, a new document suddenly appeared on the EAC website. Amazing. It had no date. It had no signature. But reportedly, if you looked at the file's metadata, it wasn't even written by Jack Cobb. It was allegedly written by Jerome Lovato from the EAC. Wait, what? The machines he certified were already in use at the agency in charge of our elections? They said everything was fine. No need to pull the uncertified machines.
Who are these people?
Thank you for that, whoever that was. All right. This is the story of how a man with no security credentials, no cybersecurity background, and no independent testing approved software, he approved software that ran your elections. Wait, no independent testing. No, because he got the tests from the companies that he was trying to certify. And how the people who were supposed to stop him didn't multiple times. That's what's going on in this story. So like she says here, again, DescentandBloom.substack.com. Go give her a follow. If you've been following along with her articles, you'll remember this isn't the first time Jack Cobb's name came up. It isn't the second or the third. But in the last article, we talked about how Cobb and the EAC were marking serious software changes as de minimis, meaning that it's only meant for hardware changes too minor to test. And even when they absolutely didn't meet the criteria per the EAC's own rules. So there were rules about what was required to have a change. All right. Here's Kabashwari Kate. Thank you. Come to How Do We Miss That? Because we have a very little time to catch up, and we bring so much more items. Thank you. We try to. So we talked about this again last week. Was this software change Eco 1188? Okay, this was a software change submitted by ES&S, which is of course the largest voting machine vendor in the country, just weeks before the 2024 election. And we talked about how Eco 1188 quietly removed a hash check in the system's configuration file. That's important because that hash check was supposed to verify the machine was running certified code. Without it, it could boot up any unauthorized or malicious software and no one would know. Risk limiting audits wouldn't catch it either because the hash check wasn't done. They don't know. So here's what she found out, and it changes everything. It's not even clear anymore if Cobb made the decision to call it a minor change. In fact, based on written affidavits from Jack Cobb himself in the Curling v. Raffensperger suit, all right, now that's a suit involving Trump from 2020 with the Georgia Secretary of State, all right? He lets the voting machine vendors themselves decide whether a change is too minor to test. Jack Cobb testified that he lets them decide. As an independent testing lab, you're supposed to be the one making that decision. Wait a minute. This is a serious change. You can tell me it's not a serious change, but it is. In a previous
lawsuit,
right?
He's the other way.
Right. He says, oh, and just so you know, if the change isn't minor, then the vendor has to pay Cobb to do a full review. So guess how many changes never get tested? I would guess a lot.
Yeah.
So the court dockets Cobb never wanted us to find. In this Curlings v. Raffensperger lawsuit, it was exposed that Pro V&V let Dominion push an untested software patch through as a de minimis change just weeks before the 2020 election. What a shock. The patch was installed on every voting machine in Georgia before the Federal Election Assistance Commission ever signed off. That's a clear violation of protocol right there. Why would this be installed before the EAC could sign off on it? 3 top cybersecurity experts, including Harry Hursty, told the court the change was not minor, not properly tested, and potentially destabilizing. Nothing to see here. Cobb's lab rubber-stamped it anyway. The EAC shrugged, and 159 counties ran with it. And he still has not faced any repercussions for that to this day. But we don't even know what exactly happened as a result of that yet. Now, again, it says right here in the lawsuit, it says in his first affidavit, Mr. Cobb stated that the ballot marking device printed ballots' QR codes are signed and encrypted. When plaintiff's experts disputed this encryption claim, Mr. Cobb in his second affidavit pointed to Dominion's own documentation as the source of his prior statement that the encoded QR codes and digital signature were encrypted. So he didn't know. And at the injunction hearing, Mr. Cobb conceded that he accepted such representations on face value rather than on any testing that he'd done. He literally admits it in court. So here's the way it works. The vendor, one of the companies that makes the voting machines, writes the change summary, marks it as de minimis, and hands it to Cobb. Cobb's team signs it and passes that report along to the EAC, and the EAC signs off. The vendor profits from our tax dollars, the EAC profits from our tax dollars, and Cobb profits from the vendors. Let me repeat, there is no independent testing from our government, no actual verification of the reported findings, and there isn't even a second opinion. Welcome to voting 2025 in America. The EAC signs only on Pro V&V and Cobb's word, or the other testing lab. And Cobb, well, he's just repeating what the vendors told him. So the EAC is basically signing off on whatever the vendors are telling him passed through Cobb and the EAC itself. Right. This wasn't a one-time fluke. He wrote just weeks ago about this, about his time at Cyber, where he did the exact same thing. His previous voting system testing lab had no meaningful test capabilities of its own, no internal protocols, and no actual source code vetting. They simply, quote unquote, tested whatever the vendors gave them and then gave their stamp of approval because the vendors, the people profiting from these machines, told them everything was fine. This is literally how our machines are distributed and tested or not tested. Nobody knows whether these things are legit. Cyber literally lost their accreditation to test our voting machines after the HAVA Act became law, primarily due to this scandal. So what Cobb did with Dominion, that's nearly identical reason to reason Cyber, that's identical to the reason that Cyber lost its accreditation. So, can anyone from the EAC please explain to me why Pro V&V gets to keep their accreditation at this point? Now? In 2025? Part of it is probably because there's only one other lab that does it, and they need at least one other lab to do so. But Jesus Christ, I can do a better job than that. I can take the software that the company sends me, test it with that software, say it's okay, and hand it to the EAC too. Why can't I do that?
Mm-hmm.
He says, now she says, I can't help but wonder when ES&S submitted ECO 1188, which again is a change that disabled critical hash verification, and it got greenlit without scrutiny just weeks before the 2024 election. Did Cobb even understand what was being removed? My guess is no. Or did he just do what he's always done, even now, let the vendor call it safe and sign his name at the bottom? Which is what I'm guessing likely happened. P.S. Cobb straight up admitted in court that he has zero background in cybersecurity. So why is he in charge of this? He had no choice but to come clean after botching technical testimony under oath in Curling v. Raffensperger. And yet, this man with no formal training in digital security, no credentialed experience in software analysis, has been certifying the software that runs our elections since the early 2000s. 2 decades this fucker's been in there. He literally testified that he had 14 years of experience in testing voting machines, but as became apparent in the course of these proceedings, he doesn't have any specialized expertise in cybersecurity testing or analysis or cybersecurity risk analysis. Further, he had not personally done any of the security testing referenced in his affidavits. He fucking lied. Like, where's the perjury charge? Okay, he admits that he had not personally done the security testing that he testified to, provided in a written signed affidavit. How is he not in prison? Now, his entire track record, of course.
Why you always lying?
Stop fucking lying. Yeah, dude, he's a fucking liar. All right. Cobb's entire track record is full of red flags that the EAC chose to ignore. I think it's beyond that. I think that they chose him for that because of the track record that he had. And I don't care if they come at me or not, but the evidence is clear here. According to official EAC records, Pro V&V's federal accreditation to certify our voting machines expired in February 2017. Under the rules at the time, voting system test labs were required to renew every 2 years. No reapplication, no accreditation, period. There it is in the rules. There's no public record showing that Jack Cobb reapplied on time. Between late 2016 and spring 2017, Dysent and Bloom was not able to find any documents anywhere showing that he'd complied with the reaccreditation requirements listed in the EAC rules. That should be publicly available. But that didn't stop Pro V&V from certifying voting system used in that time, and it didn't stop Jack Cobb. And the EAC, the Election Assistance Commission, the agency whose entire job is keeping labs like Cobb's in check, said nothing. There was no automatic alert, no red flag in the system blinking expired, no warning that Pro V&V had lost its federal accreditation. For years, nobody noticed. Or maybe they noticed and just didn't care because they kept signing off on Pro V&V's work anyway. Hundreds of software changes, certifications, approvals, all treated as if the lab were still in good standing. Why is this something Jerome Lovato did not notice? Or if he did, why didn't he report it? He's the guy whose literal job at the EAC was to oversee and validate these test labs. It took the federal lawsuit, Curling v. Raffensperger, to even raise this question. All right, that's in the court documents. Can you please advise whether ProVNV is currently an accredited testing lab certified by the EAC?
I mean, it sounds like his job is to make sure it isn't secure at this point.
Basically,
You know?
just 6 days after plaintiffs in Curling emailed Georgia's Secretary of State asking for proof of ProVNV's standing, magically, an official letter of agreement from Cobb and ProVNV suddenly appeared on the EAC's website. It didn't have a date and it didn't have a signature. According to court filings, the file metadata listed EAC official Jerome Lovato as the author. So basically he's now issuing that certification after the fact, not really even backdating it, because if he backdated it, he'd get caught acknowledging that it wasn't done in a timely fashion and that he had certified machines while his license was expired. It also incorrectly spelled Cobb's address, and the letter was addressed to someone who had left the EAC months before it even popped up. Basically trying to make it act like they sent it to somebody who was no longer there, and maybe it got lost in translation or buried in an inbox
How to
somewhere.
dress to attract.
Bullshit.
Sorry.
All right. The correct, Boulevards versus Boulevard. I don't know if it got to the right place. If this letter had existed
A
all
broken
along,
earring.
why wasn't it uploaded sooner? Why wasn't it signed? Why was it allegedly created in Photoshop and quietly backfilled onto the site? Yeah, the image metadata showed that they created this image in Photoshop. This wasn't a document that was scanned. Were they trying to cover their tracks? Well, it's pretty obvious that they were.
Yeah, definitely.
The rules that
You would
ProVNV
just
was
scan it through Adobe, right?
right.
Or Acro,
Through whatever-
what's the PDF you were?
Scanning software you had, right. Right. But you wouldn't do it in Photoshop. The
Right.
rules that ProVNV was operating under at the time clearly required a dated, signed letter as part of the reaccreditation process. How did this guy not sign a piece of paper that said that he was applying for accreditation? Without that, the lab certifications should have been invalid. Every machine approved during that time should have been pulled, but they weren't, because that would have invalidated every election since. She says that she cannot see any other explanation other than that this letter was an attempt to cover up what they'd done, but this lawsuit made that difficult. All right. For example, here's the initial letter that ProVNV had sent to the EAC as part of their initial certification in 2012. This is how the new one should have looked, complete with a date and a signature. Effective through with the signature of the acting director. At that point, it was the acting executive director of the EAC. Right? So instead, the EAC suddenly retroactively changed the rules after the scandal, issuing a 2021 notice of clarification, claiming that the accreditations for these don't actually expire unless explicitly revoked. That says that it was valid effective through February 7, 2017, clearly. That interpretation directly contradicts the existing rules in place when ProVNV's accreditation lapsed. How convenient. They're changing the rules after the fact to shoehorn in what they did. It also contradicts... What?
Just been revoked.
Yeah, right? Diplomatic immunity? I mean, that's basically what they're claiming.
Yeah.
It also contradicts the fact that there are expired accreditations for old voting system testing labs on the EAC website, and those expiration dates on their own certificates seen below on the original ProVNV certificate. Right? They quite literally changed the rules to whatever they covered their own ass after this scandal. Right? They just tried to manipulate it and sweep it under the rug. What exactly are we paying these guys for again? Oh, right. To allow them to remain election commissioners indefinitely while they illegally co-sign for private third-party groups to audit, quote-unquote, stolen clones of our election software for MAGA. I believe she's talking about cyber ninjas and the 2020 audit there. She says, side note, does anyone else think it's odd how Lovato quietly left the EAC in 2021? leaving right around the time the agency scrambled to cover for Pro V&V with that retroactive notice of clarification. And this is, again, the whole crux of it. The whole damn system is corrupt. The deeper you dig into the EAC, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't one rogue lab gaming the rules. It was a system built to let them. Because just like Cobb let the vendors tell him which software changes to test, the EAC itself let those same vendors help rewrite the rules that govern our voting machines. It's not a conspiracy theory. That's the basis of a federal lawsuit that's still ongoing, Stark v. EAC, filed in 2021. So she says again, according to court filings and internal records, the EAC allowed private voting machine vendors, the ones who profit off our elections, to secretly help draft the federal standards that determine how their machines are built and tested. It very much to me sounds a lot like what's happening in the pharmaceutical industry, where you've got pharmaceutical executives that run the FDA, right? Scott Gottlieb is a former Pfizer CEO, I believe, or a Pfizer executive. He's now the head of the EPA. I'm sorry. He's now the head of the FDA. I'm losing my mind. This all happened, again, behind closed doors with no public comment, no oversight, and zero transparency. The updated rulebook was quietly altered just days before release after meetings with corporate reps from the voting machine vendors. Hey, guys, we kind of fucked up here. Can you do us a favor and fix this? Emails obtained in discovery confirm it. The people writing our election rules were the same ones cashing checks to build the machines. And those are the rules that Pro V&V and Jack Cobb are still using today. She says, and she said that she, on a serious note, she's had some followers say they're giving up. They feel hopeless. She just wants us to know that she's not giving up. She's going to keep digging and connecting the dots and exposing every lie they bury. And you shouldn't give up either. Don't let it discourage you. Vote anyway. Speak up anyway. And keep the pressure on. No, voting gives them permission. Voting gives them your tacit approval for all the shit that they're about to do.
Makes you complicit.
Yep.
You have to make that whole system like defunct.
Crash. They can't even make a quorum if not enough people show up.
No, we're not saying give up, don't do anything. Direct action, all that stuff. I mean, you can't get the ones elected now to do what you want. So work on that first.
So here's what she
Actively
suggests.
Try to fix the system.
What else can you do other than sharing and other than voting? Call the EAC and ask them why Cobb still has a voting lab. And watch them go, if they even answer the phone. Contact your own representative or senator, useless, and ask them to request hearings or launch an inquiry. Yeah, Cory Booker's really going to launch hearings. An inquiry. Sure. He just fucking stood there with Netanyahu and shook hands. All right. File a complaint with the inspector general. And these are all something you can actually do. Read her other articles, starting with part 1 on the subject, to make sure you have the information. There's a lot more than what she even talked about here. Again, we've been covering this for weeks, and I've been covering this for years. This is one of the issues that brought me into independent media, to realize that corporate media is completely ignoring this thing and lying to you every time they tell you that a vote was good.
Well, shit, I remember Convo Couch literally watching them rig those machines,
And truck in a whole truck full of ballots in Detroit in 2000 at 3:30 in the morning that all of a sudden were just found after all the stuff was supposed to be locked. There were groups of ballots that did not complete the chain of command down in Florida. They found all kinds of stuff. Johnny and Fee and Pasta, now Truthwire, did incredible work in 2020, 2016, 2019, 2020 to expose a lot of this stuff. So again, for Descent in Bloom, our friend, she doesn't put her work behind a paywall. These stories are too urgent, too raw, too real to keep locked away. I'll never charge you to read my articles, which is we believe in a value for value system here. There's tons of value in the work that she's doing. But when 90% of mainstream media outlets are owned by 6 billionaires, it becomes hard to know who to trust. She doesn't take checks from billionaires. She doesn't take notes from PR firms. She just tells the damn story because she's not part of that media ecosystem. To stay in the loop, subscribe for free. dissentinbloom.substack.com. That's DISSENT in bloom.substack.com. It helps build awareness and keeps the pressure on. But a paid sub helps her keep digging, filing FOIAs, verifying sources, staying on the story long after the headlines fade. All right? And again, she's been cranking out articles like you wouldn't believe at a pace that is remarkable. Again, so dissentinbloom.substack.com. Go check it out. She published one the other day. Trump has fired 103 immigration judges. Here's why that matters. Important, and where they're located, and the kind of hearings that they're oversee. So check this one out. I know this was a little long, but so important, and nobody else is really talking about this. So thank you, Dissent in Bloom, for covering this stuff, for looking into the machines and exposing that corruption, because nobody else is doing it. I don't know if you're hitting something, but thank you. So that's our wall of fame. If you're able to support independent media with a couple of bucks, we really appreciate it. We don't take any sponsor funding. We are value for value, user funded. Cash App, $ Indie News Network, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, paypal.me/Indie News Network. All right. And then IndieNewsNow.com is our website. And then we've got INNnewsletter.com and IndieMediaToday.com over at Substack, where we are live right now. I also wanted to make note very quickly that Dissent and I had a one-on-one last week. Sorry, I mentioned it on Sunday night last week as well. This is up at all of our channels, both at INN Newsletter, ad-free, also at YouTube, Rumble, everywhere. All right. And we're going to record another one this week. But she said, that I've become a good friend of hers, and I appreciate that. And she's become a friend of mine, too. Highly recommend checking out the whole network. They've got a lot of good stuff over there, and appreciate the support from our friend over there. So, all right, now we're going to get to our big Fuck Israel segment. Ben, everybody buckle up. This is going to be a little bit. This is from ifamericans.org. I don't know if you know this organization. Great website. They pull in, they're kind of like almost like an Indie News Now, just for Israel-Palestine news. And
gotcha.
If Americans Now wrote this article, Israel now targets anyone trying to rescue children buried under rubble. Yeah, this is unreal. Hala Arafat died in an unimaginable agony with her husband and 4 children. 14 members of their family, 7 of them children, were killed in the bombing of their home. This is the worst. Anyone who tried to approach them was attacked by drones. And this, again, came out of Haaretz. So this is an Israeli newspaper reporting on this. One eye is closed, the other open. One hand grips the wall that's fallen on her. She's trapped in the ruins, her head and body held tightly. She's been like that all night. A light bulb is thrown next to her and she tries to grab it. Maybe it'll save her. She loses her grip on that. And then she raises her hand, a sign that she's alive, and she fights to say the words, "Save me. I'm tired. I cannot." With her last strength, she says, "Please, please save me." And these are her last words.
Yeah, I did see this. It's fucking pretty brutal.
I can't. I mean, yeah. You can see that there's a video here. So
the picture's alone enough.
It's not clear how long she lived after this picture. On July 15th, Nir Hassan wrote on X, "This woman is called Hala Arafat. She's 35. Since 2 a.m., she and 14 other members of her family, mostly children, have been beneath the rubble of their Zarqa Street house in the Al Tufa neighborhood." He spoke with the brother-in-law, who said that anyone who tried to approach her was attacked by drones. If anyone has an idea how to help, this is the time. The IDF spokesperson's office didn't bother to respond to Hassan for 12 hours. What's the hurry? Later, the spokesperson mumbled something about lack of coordinates. She died in unimaginable agony with her husband and 4 children, 14 members of their family, 7 children were killed in the bombing of their home. Why? Again, why? This isn't the only family that was slaughtered on Tuesday. The Azam family, Amir, Rateb, Karim, and 4 more babies were also destroyed. The images of the 4 infants' deaths lying on their backs in white shrouds with their faces exposed are among the most difficult. One of the infants' faces is cut. All right, so this is really, again, if Americans knew, they're talking about the Gaza Health Foundation. According to reports, the IDF shot anyone who approached. Daring women soldiers were at the joystick. Or were they soldiers playing their game of death against anyone who tried to attempt a rescue? These are the same IDF soldiers with whom Israel continues to embrace as if they're victims of this war and its heroes. Like the woman who was driving a bulldozer, was bulldozing a house and had the house fall on her bulldozer and died, and they wanted to eulogize her. She was bulldozing somebody's fucking house. They are neither victims nor heroes when they shoot with UAVs at the helpless. They're like shooters near the humanitarian aid hubs. Awful.
Who have been Americans, by the way. A lot of that. So
this is the same IDF that's known for sending rescue teams to save civilians all over the world, whether they're in Japan or Thailand, Brazil, or Turkey. The IDF no longer rescues anyone. Now it shoots anyone who tries to rescue a woman trapped between the walls of her home. Is there anything more monstrous than that? So that's this one. That's again Gideon Levy. Oritz. I got take something to drink here. We've also got this one. Mondo Weiss. Again, Indie Media Award honoree. Initial class 2022. Headlines are just fucking awful. Again, and nobody's doing anything to stop this. In the latest massacre, 15 Palestinians seeking food at the Gaza Health Foundation, which is a joke, a GHF site, die from suffocation after Israeli forces fired gas at aid seekers. Gas! They didn't fire guns, they fired gas. 15 suffocated to death. This wasn't aid distribution. Who witnessed this? Yeah, it was a real massacre committed against the hungry who came hoping to get some food. At Nasser Hospital,
people are literally starving in line at these. It's fucking awful. Yep.
At Nasser
on top
Hospital,
of the red light, green light stuff.
In Khan Yunis, young men carried bodies, and hungry children cried out in front of corpses wrapped in white shrouds laying on the ground, bidding them farewell for the last time. All these victims fell at a Gaza Humanitarian Foundation Center, which claims to distribute aid to the hungry. Quote, we received a call that there were a large number of martyrs and injuries at the aid distribution center in Rafah, explained Ezzeddine Abu Subha, a civil defense paramedic who headed to the incident scene in Rafah in the morning. He continued that when our teams arrived at the location, more than 20 martyrs and dozens of injuries were recorded by civil defense and Red Crescent teams there. But unlike any previous aid massacres where Palestinian aid seekers have been shot by bullets, the Palestinians killed today faced a new threat: poisonous gas. Abu Subha explained that all the cases were lifted into ambulances were proven to be eyewitnesses to cases of suffocation from poisonous gases, as their bodies were free from wounds or blood. He said that the apparent cause of death were a combination of toxic fumes and trampling in the stampedes that followed in the chaos. Still, he couldn't determine the cause of death officially and was waiting for the official report from the Ministry of Health to announce the exact causes. And we know that they don't really have the equipment or the supplies to really properly test anything at this point.
Anything.
That confirmation arrived hours later.
Can you imagine getting a toxicology report? Would be nuts.
The Ministry of Health issued a statement saying that 21 citizens had been martyred, including 15 who died by suffocation due to gas being fired at the crowds and the stampede that followed at the American-run aid distribution center. Again, American-run aid distribution center by private mercenaries. We reported that it was going to happen and that it was happening, and now they're murdering everyone there. Yeah, look at this. It's the first time that suffocation... Some of you are
nurses and doctors in the chat. Does that look like a normal facility in any capacity? Like, no. You know?
It's the first time that suffocation and stampede deaths were recorded at these aid distribution centers, quote unquote, even though they really don't distribute aid. They are meant to gather everybody together so they can murder more people.
Yeah.
The ministry also said in its statement that the Israeli occupation and the American organization are deliberately committing systematic massacres against the starving. Yep. In a testimony collected by Mondoweiss from one of the survivors at the scene, Ahmed Abu Amra recounted, quote, at 4 a.m., people gathered at the entrances of the GHF centers waiting for food distribution. The numbers were huge. At that time, armed American company employees who stood not far from the civilians used loudspeakers to order people to retreat and not enter the site. He continued that when the people arrived, and with the repeated calls by the American company employees not to cross the fence, everyone stood still, crowded together due to the large numbers. At around 6 a.m., remember they've been standing there 2 fucking hours, the Israeli army started shooting at the gathered people. He adds that at the same time, while the Israeli army was firing bullets at the people, the American company employees were launching stun grenades directly at the individuals, hitting them in the head, causing many injuries. Then
we know where they learned that from.
Yep. Then the gas bombs began falling amid the crowd, leading to panic and a stampede. People were running in a terrified scene, and anyone who fell to the ground could not stand up as others trampled over them. Abu Amr lost his cousin today in the chaos at the, I don't even want to call it the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation site. That's fucking disgraceful. This wasn't aid distribution. It was a massacre, a real massacre committed against the hungry who came hoping to get some food. He added that even the American company employees were firing stun guns at our heads. Again, confirmation by multiple people. They launched more than 16 stun grenades directly at the people. I saw them with my own eyes. I was injured by shrapnel from one that exploded near sand and gravel, and the stones flew toward the people. I was hit in the head, but it wasn't serious, but others were directly hit in the head by the grenades. Some lost their eyes. Some had their mouths injured and noses broken. Because we know that there's adequate hospital supplies to patch them back up, right? Abu Amr explains why he and others continue to go to these locations despite the risks. He says, I'm a living example. For 4 days, my 3 children, my wife and I have not eaten anything. 4 days without food. That's why we go for any option that gives us even the small chance of getting food. It's literally fucking Squid Game, the Hunger Games. Red light, green light.
And keep in mind, there's fucking aid miles away, literally being destroyed as we speak by Israelis who feel like they have every right to do that.
And blocking the trucks from coming in. Months worth of aid.
Atrocious.
Abu Amr
literally
explains,
there waiting.
All right, the only solution and alternative to this tragedy and these daily massacres is for all of us, the residents of Gaza, to agree not to go to these sites, but we must insist that aid comes to the doorstep of our tents. We've been displaced, our homes destroyed, and our children killed. And now to get food, we have to face death daily. This is unbearable. We deserve to eat and drink. My children don't deserve to sleep without food for 4 fucking days.
Could you imagine?
No,
I mean,
I can't, because my kids can't go 1 hour without fucking eating. So, and I can't even imagine what the pain of a parent to know that you can't do anything for a child that's crying out for help. The helplessness of that as a parent. Fuck these motherfuckers. But it doesn't stop there. Let's go to another Indie Media Award honoree, Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. This was the next fucking day. Israeli forces kill 93 Palestinians in Gaza over 24 hours. 93 killed, 367 wounded as a result of Israel's genocidal war over the past 24 hours as relentless U.S.-backed Israeli strikes continue. I love that Dave doesn't pull punches there. The health ministry said that another body was recovered from the rubble. A number of victims are still under the rubble and on the streets, where ambulance and civil defense crews are unable to reach them at this time because they keep getting attacked. The ministry recorded a total of 26 aid-related deaths and 32 injuries. The latest violence brings the total number of aid seekers killed since the U.S. and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation began operating at the end of May to 877, and the number of wounded to 5,666. The UN's been reporting a slightly higher aid death toll than the health ministry, but 800. Where else would 877 people be allowed to be murdered lining up for food and not have the U.S. military going in to make sure that they got that fucking food? Al Jazeera reported that 8 Palestinians tasked with protecting aid trucks were killed by a drone strike on a convoy of aid trucks that were headed to northern Gaza. Of course, because if you're not in one of the concentration camps, they automatically assume that you're Hamas and you're targeted and murdered. Body parts scattered, and civil defense members had to collect the body parts. Israeli strikes on Thursday included the tank shelling of the Holy Family Catholic Church in Gaza City, Gaza's sole Catholic church, which killed at least 3 people and wounded several others. Other Israeli attacks on Gaza City killed at least 20 Palestinians. The official death count, according to the health ministry, is now 58,667 since October 7th, 2023, and the number of wounded to another 139,000, almost 140. Studies have found that the ministry's numbers are a significant undercount. It's probably 300,000 or 400,000, if not more, and estimates that factor in indirect deaths caused by the Israeli siege and destruction of all Gaza's civilian infrastructure bring the death toll into the hundreds of thousands. Easily. You're going to have millions killed in the end.
I don't know if you brought Eva's thing on the... I think the same health ministry said that 85% of the population of Gaza is like
stage
5 malnutrition.
I didn't put that out. A bunch of other people did. I have other ones.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, it's literally, that's the point of no return. There's not much coming back from that, even when you get food later.
That's what they said. You know? Yeah, even like, food doesn't help. That these people are literally going to have organ failures and like the worst.
Yeah, you're gonna have to IV and it's gonna be a mess. So 85%.
But remember that there's a lot more than just Gaza happening, because Israel is also attacking Syria. They're attacking Lebanon. They're attacking the West Bank. So latest South Syria ceasefire crumbles on July 18th, the day after the 93 were killed. At least 638 killed. They're just fucking murdering everybody, Israel. Bedouins and Druze trade claims of massacres as Israel allows Syria to send troops temporarily. Israel allowed Syria to send troops into southern Syria in order to kill 638 people. Fighting between the Druze and Bedouins in Syria's Sudwaya governorate continues to rage, despite the second ceasefire of the week being declared on Wednesday. The toll in the fighting and killing since Sunday is now up to at least 638, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. The fighting started Sunday in the Bedouin neighborhood of Makus, with both sides claiming tit-for-tat kidnappings, eventually leading Druze forces into the area, and the locals called nearby Bedouin tribes. That escalated quickly across the governorate. And now both sides are trading blame for respective massacres in the area. And given the enormous death toll, it's not unlikely that both are accurate. The Bedouins are backed by the Syrian government forces. They were accused to executing Druze several times in the area, while Syrian state media is reporting a large massacre in a hospital by forces loyal to a Druze cleric. The death tolls overall split among hundreds of civilians, hundreds of combatants, and even hundreds of Syrian Defense Ministry forces that got attacked by Israel when trying to enter the region in defiance of Israel's ban on Syria deploying troops to southern Syria. Wait, I'm going to repeat that part of the line because that is just remarkable. Israel is banning Syria deploying troops to southern Syria. Yes, I said that correctly.
Yeah,
Israel,
this has been Israel and the Jelani forces attacking the Druze. You know, it's rough over there right now, especially in Zawaida. You know,
Israel reiterated on Thursday. Israel reiterated on Thursday that the ban remained in place, and Prime Minister Netanyahu bragged that the Wednesday ceasefire was only achieved because of Israeli force. Yeah, from a war criminal, of course. I'm going to believe what they say. Now that the ceasefire seems to be failing, which was the plan the whole time, Israel announced on Friday that it's allowing Syrian troops to go back into the area for 48 hours to try to tamp down the violence. And then what? They're going to start attacking the Syrian troops that were there when you allowed them to be there in the first place because they didn't get out in 48 hours? Syrian troops are said to be redeployed. Whether that's going to actually slow the violence remains to be seen, as the Syrian troops are accused of participating in the summary executions and other violence against the Druze. Fighting and going on outside of the city of Sudwaida in nearby villages with more and more forces massing on each side. It's bad. The Bedouins are reportedly preparing a counterattack against Sudwaida itself after seizing several towns and villages on the outskirts. So now you've got balkanization happening within Syria, which was the goal the entire time. So now the Bedouins are claiming some area, the Druze are claiming some area, the Jelani, the Al-Qaeda forces, what HTS are claiming an area, and now you've got smaller regional sects. That's what they want because nobody can then come to a consensus for the country. The death toll is also likely even higher than is being reported by the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. One hospital in Sudwaida alone claims to have received more than 400 bodies since Monday. The actual toll may not be ultimately known for some time, but one thing is clear, it continues to rise, and this situation is far from resolved. Again, antiwar.com, Indie Media Ward Honoree. This was Jason Ditz, DITZ. Fuck Israel for that. But we're not done yet. Now, you mentioned Eva Bartlett. I did want to bring an Eva Bartlett story, but it was about a doctor that we have literally been talking about since December when he was abducted.
Yeah.
And Eva has been on this story since day one. I believe she personally knows Dr. Safia. Israeli army abducted Palestinian doctor Hussam Abu Safia finally gets a mention in legacy media. And she says NBC issued a not terrible but not great article on the heroic doctor from Gaza. However, they stopped short of detailing his torture, nor the Israeli torture, rape, and murder of 3 doctors from Gaza prior. Of course they would omit that. Free Dr. Hussam Abu Safia now. All right. She says if you search for reports on the abduction and torture of Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, they are scant in legacy media, and if mentioned, usually unquestioningly parrot the Israeli lies about his ties to or working for Hamas. Thus, I was surprised this morning to come across the NBC article, not the best by far, but with some truths. More below. For background on the Israeli army's abduction and subsequent torture of Gaza's doctor, See her previous, and here it is. From January, I believe we covered this from RT. So she says, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia is not okay, from his lawyer. My last visit to him was on July 9th, 2025. He's lost over 40 kilograms, more than a third of his body weight. At the time of his arrest, he weighed 100 kilograms. Today, he weighs no more than 60 kilograms.
So do the math, everybody. That's what, 4 months, 5 months? You're dropping 40 kilos.
7 months.
You know? Yeah. At that weight, at 100 kg, that's pretty fucking rough.
On June 24th, he was severely beaten. His room was specifically raided. He was brutally assaulted in the chest area and sustained severe bruises to his face, head, back, and neck. The beating lasted approximately 30 minutes. This is a doctor. He requested medical care, proper testing, and to be examined by a cardiologist, but his request was denied.
Of course it was.
He suffers from irregular heartbeat. His eyeglasses, which had recently been sent to him through his lawyer, were broken. He's still wearing winter clothes while enduring starvation, torture, solitary confinement, and total deprivation, buried underground with no exposure to sunlight. Then she puts some of the June 30th NBC excerpts, quote, before his detention, Abu Safia, 51, by the way, I'm also 51, who became the head of Kamal Adwan in 2024, probably because they murdered the head of the hospital previously, was the lead physician in Gaza for Med Global, a Chicago-based nonprofit that has partnered with local healthcare workers since 2018 and arranges volunteer missions to the enclave. The organization's co-founder, Dr. John Kaler, told NBC News in a phone interview Thursday that he was very afraid that Abu Safia won't make it out alive from detention. He added that the physician was a friend of mine, a hero, a mentor, who, among other things, helped to establish nutrition stabilization centers in the Gaza Strip. On his visits to Gaza, Kaler said he had never seen any indication that Abu Safia was linked with Hamas militant group or any suggestion that it was operating inside the Kamal Adwan hospital. Of course not. 5 other members of Med Global's team have also been detained. And on Monday, the organization called for the release of scores of health workers detained by Israel, including Abu Safia, which we know they won't do. Their targeting and attacks on the healthcare system is the point. Israeli authorities have repeatedly and blatantly violated international humanitarian law in repeated detentions of and attacks on healthcare workers, it said in a joint letter published on Monday alongside several other organizations. According to Al-Mizan Center for Human Rights, an NGO that advocates for the people of Gaza and that has been providing legal support to Abu Safia, no formal charges have been made against the hospital director as of Thursday. They're just holding him without charge indefinitely. Asked for an update on his case on Friday, the Israeli military did not immediately respond. What a shock. But a spokesman for the Al-Mizan Center for Human Rights said Thursday that he was still being detained in Ofer prison in the occupied West Bank, where he faced dire conditions, inadequate food, and overcrowded cells. And torture. At least three Palestinian doctors abducted from Gaza have died in Israeli prisons since October 2023. In September of 2024, UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health stated that Dr. Ziad Eldalu is the 3rd doctor confirmed to have died while being detained by Israel. Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh, head of the orthopedics department at Al-Shifa Hospital, was, quote, killed under torture at Ofer Detention Center on April 19th of last year. Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh was likely raped to death, wrote UN Special Rapporteur of the occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese, who deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. Dr. Ilyad al-Rantisi was killed due to torture at an Israeli Shin Bet interrogation center in Ashkelon 1 week after his detention in November of 2023. Israeli authorities concealed his death for more than 7 months. Why? they're not going to face any repercussions for it anyway. Why not just announce it? The torture of Palestinians in Israeli prisons has been widely reported. Methods include electric shocks to the genitals, stress positions, psychological torture, near starvation, and rape, resulting in serious internal damage, sometimes leading to death. Collar said his colleague was a heroic physician whose moral compass is directly pointing due north. Thousands of Palestinians are held by Israel under a practice known as administrative detention, which Israeli authorities use to hold people without trial or other usual legal proceedings, often based on alleged secret intelligence and evidence that they don't share with detainees, their families, or legal representatives. Gestapo
Often
shit.
made by AI.
It's Gestapo level stuff. We decided it's so, and we're not going to show you the evidence that shows you so. The practice has been roundly criticized by human rights groups, saying it's used to hold Palestinians indefinitely without charge or due process, while Israel has defended the practice as necessary security measure. In their letter on Monday, Med Global and other organizations said that as of February 2025, at least 185 healthcare workers from Gaza and the West Bank remained in Israeli custody. Their conditions were unknown, it added, let alone the scores that have been murdered by Israel. Many of these released have reported severe abuse, while some died in custody also. She says that the Israeli use
I read somewhere
Go ahead.
that Israel is essentially killing the witnesses to their crimes here. That the medical staff would be the ones to be able to accurately depict the actual horrors on a medical level. That this is what's happening. They're torturing them so that they don't say anything. They're, literally holding them hostage.
So they can't clinically describe what's happening from a medical perspective. Wow. She says the Israeli use of administrative detention to indefinitely imprison and torture Palestinians, including women and children, isn't controversial. It's outrageous and illegal. If it were one of the U.S. enemy states doing this to just one civilian, legacy media would report on it endlessly, create PR campaigns about it, and definitely not use the term controversial to describe this barbaric practice. And she wrote about this in April of 2024 and more recently. She did one that his wife, Lena, apparently did a recent interview in which she said that he could have joined me in Kazakhstan, but he told me he couldn't abandon his patients or his colleagues. He believed leaving would be a betrayal of his duty. I don't know anything, where he is, if he's alive, if he's okay. I follow the news every day, terrified by what I hear about the conditions of detainees in Israeli prisons. All of these will be linked in the description afterwards at the Substack, because there's just too many to put in the YouTube description. But we're not done there, folks. All right. Again, this is the tweet about his torture
lawyer
from his lawyer, right? And that was one of the last photos we had. That was him getting into the tank, and that was the last photo we had of him being taken in his winter clothes. Now, after hearing all of that, I'm going to play a Caitlin Johnstone couple of minutes because it makes a lot more sense now in context. Caitlin wrote that if you're still supporting Israel in 2025, there's something wrong with you as a person. I'm going to play this narrated by her husband, Tim.
If you're still supporting Israel in 2025, there's something wrong with you as a person. Sometimes I think it's astonishing how aggressively Israel's supporters work to stomp out criticism of Israel. Then I remember that these people also support mass murdering children. Trying to take away my speech rights is one of their less evil goals. It shouldn't shock me. I saw someone talking online about how crazy it is that music groups who speak out against Israel's atrocities are starting to form alliances with each other in an effort to counteract the campaign to silence them and destroy their careers. saying it shouldn't be necessary to form an alliance in order to oppose an ongoing genocide. And that's true, it shouldn't be necessary. But it also shouldn't surprise us that people who think bombing hospitals is fine would try to cancel musicians for criticizing Israel. One mistake Westerners keep making is thinking of Israel's supporters as normal people with normal moral standards, just because we happen to know them and interact with them in our communities. They look like us, speak like us, dress like us, and act like us, so we assume they must think and feel a lot like us as well. But they don't. If you're still supporting Israel in the year 2025, there's something seriously wrong with you as a person. You do not have a normal, healthy sense of empathy and morality. It's 2025. Israeli soldiers are telling the press that they're being ordered to massacre starving civilians trying to obtain food from aid centers. Countless doctors have been telling the world that Israeli snipers are routinely, deliberately shooting children in the head and chest throughout the Gaza Strip. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and all the leading genocide experts and human rights authorities are saying that a genocide is being perpetrated in Gaza. The New York fucking Times just published an op-ed by a Zionist genocide scholar who's finally admitting that it's a genocide. There is no way to deny what this is anymore. If you still support Israel in the year 2025, it's not because you don't believe Israel is committing horrific atrocities. It's because you believe those horrific atrocities are good and you want to see more of them. Most Israel supporters will deny that this is the case, because they lie. They lie constantly. They have no moral problem with lying. They have no moral problem with burning children alive, so of course they have no problem with lying. That's where people go wrong. They assume Israel supporters can't possibly be lying about their concerns about anti-Semitism in order to promote the information interests of Israel, because nobody could be that evil. But Israel supporters think it's fine to intentionally starve babies by blockading baby formula from entering Gaza. Of course they are that evil. People assume Israel's supporters wouldn't deliberately stage fake anti-Semitic incidents or artificially inflate anti-Semitism figures in their own countries so that their governments will implement authoritarian measures to stomp out criticism of Israel in the name of fighting anti-Semitism, because they assume nobody could be that depraved. But these people think it's fine for the IDF to systematically assassinate Palestinian journalists to stop them from telling the truth. Of course they are that depraved. Of course they'd try to silence our speech. Of course they'd try to send our kids off to war with Iran. Of course they'd work to manipulate our government. Of course they'd pollute the information ecosystem with mountains of lies. They'd support a live-streamed genocide. They're bad people. Supporting Israel and its actions is not some political opinion like your position on property taxes or marijuana legalization. It's not just some people having a point of view we need to respect and treat as equal to our own view on the matter. They are working to make it possible to conduct an extermination campaign of unfathomable horror. That's as political as a gang rape and just as worthy of respect. There's not really anything you can put past Israel's supporters at this point. They will lie. They will manipulate. They will pretend to believe things they do not believe. They will pretend to feel things they do not feel. And they will do these things to facilitate some of the worst atrocities you can possibly imagine. This is who Israel's supporters are. They're showing you who they are every single day.
Oh, fuck yeah, dude. Indie Media Award honoree Caitlin Johnstone. Also, you totally user-funded. She takes no sponsorships. She takes no anything other than what people give her for her work. Amazing. Love her. Caitlin John ST.ONE. So you just spell it all out, Caitlin Johnstone, and put a dot before the last 3 letters. That's how you get to her URL. Man, and I still got more. I got one more. And this is from B'nai Blend over at the Palestine Chronicle, which is Ramsey Baroud's outlet. All right?
Yep.
And this is important because I thought that, you know, they always try to hedge and go to the mainstream media and ask them to cover. How come you're not covering it? Well, this is on the need to go beyond asking them to cover to cover Palestinian stories, okay? So, on July 11th, illegal Israeli Jewish settlers murdered 2 Palestinians in the town of Shinjil, north of Ramallah, in the occupied West Bank. 23-year-old Muhammad Shalabi and U.S. citizen Saif Eden Muslat are the latest victims of the Zionist plan to ethnically cleanse all Palestinians from their homeland. Not just Gaza. Remember, people from the West Bank didn't attack anything on October 7th. They had nothing to do with this. And yet they're also being systematically exterminated and displaced. Amid escalating settler attacks across the region. Okay. No, it's just fucking Israelis just attacking the people who live there. Muslat's death drew particular attention, perhaps because of his U.S. citizenship, as well as his particularly violent death. Murdered while visiting relatives on his family's farm, his relatives attest that settlers beat Muslat, then prevented ambulances from reaching him for several hours. Remember we read the thing about how the drones were preventing people from getting to a woman who was buried under buildings? This tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Zionists also fatally shot his friend, leaving him to bleed out, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. Settlers are often depicted as armed and dangerous while somehow being separate from government. In fact, these attacks are occurring under full military protection with political approval from the Zionist regime. Shortly after the news broke of the tragedy, activist circles took to social media and beyond to lament that that most mainstream media had ignored this tragedy, while at best only giving it a few lines. Actually, New York Times reporters Aaron Boxerman reported from Jerusalem and Fatima Abdul Karim from Ramallah did cover the incident, but unfortunately with the usual slant notable in such articles by the Times. You know, he happened to have died, not that he was brutally beaten by Israelis. The very title reeks of so-called two-sidesism, meaning that reporters treated violence committed by both sides as somehow equally violent and regrettable. Seemingly a reversal of Trump's infamous defense of white nationalists during their participation in a 2017 rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, not North Carolina. Very fine people on both sides, he said. The Times referred to rock throwing on part of the Palestinians against the armed settlers with lethal weapons as a clash. Perhaps this bias happens because very often Western media rely mostly on Israeli sources, thus refusing to seek out other witnesses for their story. Hence, the coverage comes out this way. Mohammed Shalabi, 23, was shot and killed during the clashes, according to Palestinian health officials. It was not immediately clear who shot him. Both armed settlers and Israeli forces were on the scene. In the case of Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who was shot in the back of the head by an Israeli soldier, Israel at first, remember, denied knowing the cause of her death, then claimed it wasn't intentional on part of the shooter. That was one of the incidents that radicalized me permanently against Israel, honestly. The way that they treated her and then treated her funeral was one of the most disgraceful things I've ever seen in my life. The Israeli military said in a statement that the violence began on Friday when Palestinians hurled stones at Israeli civilians, lightly injuring 2 of them. The Times article continues. Violence has soared in the West Bank since the start of the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. You mean almost 2 years ago? Israel has increased the violence because Palestinians have not ramped up their attacks on Israelis in that time. because that would give the Israelis an excuse to destroy the entire area. Thus, there is no context given for Palestinian resistance, in this case, in the form of stone throwing, no mention of the Nakba of 1948, when Israeli violence towards the indigenous population actually began. And even before 1948, when the terrorism had started happening in other Arab nations of Jews to force them and lead them to believe, brainwash them into believing that the only safe place for them to be would be in Palestine, aka Israel. There's the same lack of framework pertaining to the entity's genocide in Gaza, a siege, not a war, on the total population, not just Hamas, all done in the hopes of displacing inhabitants of the entire strip, which they're doing. Although there's some testimony given by Palestinian witnesses later in the article, it focuses solely on extremist Israeli settlers who were assumed to be acting on their own. As Aaron Turgeman wrote in 2015, again, remember, this did not start October 7th, the game of blame the hand, which is the settlers, has been played since the days of early militant Zionism. A move which allows the entity to carry on its colonization project with impunity, but in reality, it's the case that the hand does not operate by itself. It's the head that moves the hand. And the head is the Israeli government, representing Israel's Jewish population. You know, that reminds me, and I recall back to when we watched Issa Amro. He has the video of the settlers attacking his place and threatening to set fire to his trees and throwing rocks at his house. And okay, and again, that's blame the settlers? No, there were IDF soldiers standing between the settlers and Issa. He couldn't respond or he'd be killed by the IDF. That's hand with the head approving. Recalling an earlier incident, the Times article concludes with a recap of another Palestinian-American boy who was murdered at the hands of Israeli forces. You covered this with Colin on INN News. Colin was really upset about this. All right. Yeah. In April, Amir Rabi, a 14-year-old boy from Paterson, New Jersey, died after Zionist soldiers shot him 11 times. The justification? Times reporters conclude in a chillingly straightforward manner, the Israeli military said he'd thrown stones, labeling him as a terrorist. Apparently, his family disagreed, but still the reporters gave no hint that perhaps death by 11 bullets is not a fitting penalty for throwing stones. There's no collective punishment or, proportional response type of measurement here being held to account. Writing for Palestine Chronicle, South African journalist Iqbal Jassad asks, has slaughter of Palestinians in Gaza become normalized? Well, we remember that guy on Israeli TV saying they kill 100 people a day in Gaza and nobody cares. Judging by articles that don't question the legality of extrajudicial killings, not just in Gaza, but in all of occupied Palestine, the answer must be yes. Zionism has always relied on the support of Western powers, and that support relies on the projection of image. Western journalists buy into this ploy by repeating the regime's refusal to take responsibility for any of its crimes. Nevertheless, there are choices that extend beyond the mainstream. In A New Generation Bears Witness, Ramzi Baroud, founder of Palestine Chronicle, describes an emerging group of young journalists in Gaza whose mission is to cut through the myths propagated by Western media, the ones that haven't already been killed. Over 200 have been. For example, compare how these journalists cover this story with the ways that mainstream platforms report the news. As for the latter, there was no context, no effort to question information provided by the Zionist regime, who lies constantly and has been caught lying constantly. Although there might be a few comments from Palestinian observers, these are mentioned so briefly that they carry very little weight. Palestinian reporters, along with those sympathetic to their cause, provide context and a backstory that makes clear how this was no random act. According to Palestine Chronicle staff, The murder of Shalabi and Buslat occurred amid an escalation of settler and military violence along the central and northern West Bank. Again, not Gaza. No Hamas in the West Bank. Israel's genocide in Gaza, now in its 10th month, also provides a backdrop for this story. I would say it's much more than its 10th month, but it's now in like its 20th month, I think. Lebanese pan-Arabist source Al-Mayadeen explained further that these attacks are part of the entity's ongoing efforts to occupy more Palestinian territory. Every day they move the line a little further in, a little further in. Now they just declared an entire zone in one of the three areas that they now that the people now need to clear out of that too, and that's where their freshwater desalination plant is, and a bunch of other important stuff too. In response to this new wave of Israeli aggression in Gaza and across the West Bank, Palestinian filmmakers are proving that art imitates life, and sometimes vice versa. More importantly, these films provide another lens through which to counter Israeli Hezbollah. For instance, Watermelon Pictures offers a wide variety of films that depict, through documentary and fiction, the lives of contemporary Palestinians who resist Israeli theft of land and lives. Included on their website, Farah Nablusi's The Teacher follows a charismatic instructor, Bassem, whose son died from neglect while detained in an Israeli prison. To compensate, he takes two young men under his wing. After the oldest is shot by a settler who seems determined to burn his family's trees, Bassem takes the culprit to court, but his efforts are in vain because there's no justice for Palestinians under occupation. In this case, art foreshadows life, as Nablusi wrote the film script several years ago, only to have it released last year. Still, the only change for Palestinians is the escalation of violence that's been directed against them since the Nakba, an event funded by Western governments but ignored and or misreported by the media. Given their reluctance to report anything other than the official story, it's not enough to ask that mainstream news cover these stories from Palestine. Given their unqualified reliance on Zionist narratives, it is perhaps best that they don't, because they'll just misrepresent it, whitewash it, and water it down. On the other hand, there's an abundance of credible sources that provide context for these tragic stories. Mondoweiss, which we brought earlier, Al-Mayadeen, which we cover often, Palestine Chronicle here, the Electronic Intifada, Resistance News Network on Telegram. These platforms and more rely on narratives told through various indigenous lenses. Quote, despite the devastation in Gaza, a new understanding of the tragic realities there and throughout Palestine is emerging, Baroud writes. These lessons will endure. A key lesson is that Palestinians, like other victims of conflict and colonialism, are not inherently dependent on the West for their truths to be known and acknowledged. Again, shout out to Reef and Colin for bringing those stories to INN News. For those looking for credible narratives and backstory, it's time to break their dependence too on official news. Again, abandon corporate media and encourage your family to do so wherever possible. They are lying, paid propagandists on behalf of the Zionist regime. This is yet another example of that they do so.
Yeah.
So, fuck Israel. Fuck Israel. And once again, fuck Israel, because they're murdering, lying scumbags who are stealing land and genociding a population while denying that they're doing it the entire time. It's as disgusting and gaslighting as anything. And they're doing it in the name of religion, which is even more disgusting. Well, YouTube certainly doesn't like us talking about stuff like that. So if you're able to, it means please support the network with a tip somewhere else other than on YouTube. The best ways to do that are at Cash App, $ Indie News Network. Cash App, it's an app on your phone. ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. Kameshwari Kate did that earlier today. You've got paypal.me/Indie News Network. You've got our website at indienewsnow.com. And then we've got the Substacks at innewsletter.com and then at indiemediatoday.com, which is where we are live right now. So you can actually go and watch us at indiemediatoday.com. And by the way, subscribe to indiemediatoday.com if you're not already doing so. All the clips from this get emailed out. I emailed out another tech tips video. We're going to show that. I'll at least show you what it looks like later on. But I wanted to, I know we're running a little long because I knew fuck Israel was going to take a long time. Okay. Yeah. Now we've got, you know what? I got to quickly get through the Gordon Dimmock stuff and the UK stuff. It's crazy. So last week we said Gordon Dimmock was going to turn himself into police, and he did. So he tells this story about how on Monday, 15th of July, I walked into a police station and handed myself in. I did it calmly, peacefully, and with absolute clarity. I told them who I was. I told them I support Palestine action. I told them I've encouraged others to do the same. I handed them a printed declaration confirming all of it. And I made clear that I understood the legal risk, including the Terrorism Act's potential 14-year sentence for encouragement. And they took my ID, they took my declaration, they took my phone number, and then they let me go. No caution, no arrest, no interview under caution, nothing. At first glance, it might look like a small win, but thanks to Craig Murray, we know exactly why this happened. And again, I'm going to encourage everyone to go read the rest of this article. It's not that long. But again, 100% Gordon supports Palestine action. He opposes genocide, and no law, no police force, no delay tactic will ever convince him that doing so is wrong. This is what conscience looks like. This is what resistance looks like. You can't arrest what's everywhere, but if they try, you'll know it wasn't about terrorism. It was about fear. So
why did they hold off? What did Craig Murray say?
Craig Murray said,
in short,
the UK government is deliberately delaying arrests and stalling prosecutions so it can stand in court and pretend everything is fine, that no one's been harmed, that no chilling effect exists, that no journalists or priests or pensioners or protesters have been terrorized by this law. But I've got news for them. Silence isn't the absence of harm, it's the evidence of it. Speaking of which,
had the date up above that.
That was July 14th. That was
21st of July.
No, 14th.
For judicial review, 21st of
that's
July.
Tomorrow.
Okay.
That will be tomorrow. So,
gotcha.
Also, so Gordon's an Indie Media Award honoree. Here's another one, Ricky and Council of State Media. Right? Democracies don't treat old ladies as terrorists for objecting to genocide. Says, not sure who needs to hear this, but the UK is not a democracy. Never was. It's always allowed us just enough freedom to give the illusion of democracy while depriving anyone who threatens power of their freedom. The UK is a fascist oligarchy with a pseudo-democratic veneer. The latest evidence comes from the police crackdown on a peaceful protest against the decision to proscribe Palestine action. Shortly before the protest, Ricky wrote a piece asking if they were allowed to object to the proscription, and now they have their answer. The answer is no. At least not if you're expressing support for Palestine action and your objection to the proscription. It's a bit silly, isn't it? Because it means you can only object to the proscription if you don't support Palestine action. And even then, I'm not clear the objection is legally permissible. Perhaps it would still count as terrorism. Who knows? So for legal reasons, Ricky has to clarify that he's not offering his own support for Palestine action here. He can't. The group no longer exists, so how can you support a group that doesn't exist? It's as absurd as expressing your support for the resistance in 1984. Yesterday, we saw outrageous scenes as peaceful protesters were manhandled by police. One was former government lawyer Tim Crossland, who politely explained the absurdity of the situation as police carried him away by his arms and legs. This is what happens in modern-day Britain if we're opposed to genocide. It's quite something, isn't it? He said, while suspended in the air. Those cops must be so proud. Others arrested were middle-aged and elderly women who could not possibly be seen as a threat, but were treated as terrorists for expressing an honestly held opinion in their attempt to stop a genocide. British police seem to think being on the right side of history involves dragging away an octogenarian priest and prosecuting her under the Terrorism Act. I don't care what the law says. If you think Reverend Sue Parfit is a terrorist, you're an idiot. Perhaps I committed a thought crime by saying that, though. Yeah, her. They arrested her and called her a terrorist.
Yep.
If you still don't understand how draconian this is, just know that when journalists and social media influencers have been arrested under the Terrorism Act for objecting to genocide, they've had their homes raided and torn apart like Asa Winstanley. They've been banned from using electronic devices, and even leaving the house, and the media hasn't even bothered reporting on it, like Sarah Wilkinson. They've just been memory holed while they await a trial that could be years away. It's unclear whether authorities will go this far with Sue Parfit, but they've done so with others, so why not? When the Terrorism Act was debated in Parliament in 1999, we were told it wouldn't be used in cases of direct action, and it wouldn't be used to suppress opinions the government disapproves of, but that is exactly what's happening here. And it's also being done on behalf of Israel, which is even more disgraceful. They're taking orders from another country. In this case, the opinion that's being suppressed is the belief that Palestine Action was doing the right thing. This is an opinion you're not allowed to hold or express in the UK, and again, for legal reasons, Ricky must say that he's not expressing that opinion here. He's simply pointing out the absurdities in suppressing opinions. The government could so easily just stop arming Israel and fulfill its legal obligations to prevent genocide. Instead, it's chosen to treat the most well-meaning, thoroughly decent, and utterly harmless human beings as terrorists for objecting to the government's inaction. That's for real. Palestine Action has been dissolved, meaning people are being arrested for supporting a group that doesn't even exist. It gets even more absurd when you understand it's not the tactics of Palestine Action that are legally defined as terrorism, it's the name. An individual who used the same tactics without any connection to the group wouldn't be charged with terrorism. They'd be charged with breaking an entry, trespass, vandalism, etc., and they could possibly be found not guilty, just like in one case when Keir Starmer was the defense lawyer. The proscription of Palestine Action is a tactic to get around the problem of activists being found not guilty on the basis that their actions were justified. It ensures that people must be found guilty because being part of the group or expressing support for the group is the crime. A name is terrorism. A name. This abusive law means we're treating people as terrorists for supporting groups that don't exist, that resorted to behavior that's not terrorism to stop a genocide that our government is illegally participating in.
Yep.
We're seeing the silencing of dissent by a weak government composed of war criminals who are afraid the law will catch up to them. The draconian measures are not being introduced because the establishment is winning, but because it's losing. When the establishment has control of the narrative, it will allow dissent. It will allow the illusion of freedom, but the moment it starts losing control of the narrative, those freedoms will be taken away. In other words, your freedoms are conditional on you letting the war criminals win. Does that sound like democracy to you? Fucking Ricky is so brilliant. Love that guy. Support independent media. Support Council of State Media. councilofstatemedia.uk. I also wanted to bring an article by the dissident, former INN co-founder, good buddy of mine. We're due to have another one-on-one, I'm guessing, in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. He wrote an article, and he's been cranking out 5 articles a week. All of his articles, by the way, get linked in INNnewsletter.com on a daily basis, or the next day. Sometimes he publishes it after I get the daily out. Britain's Zionist police state is out of control. In order to protect Israel and Zionism, the UK has lost its mind. And I'm just going to bring the first and the beginning and the end of this one. He says, the UK keeps sinking further and further into a full-blown autocracy in order to criminalize speech and activism critical of Israel. Recently, the British state officially proscribed the activist group Palestine Action as a terrorist org, making it illegal to express support for the group through chanting, wearing clothing, or displaying articles such as flags, signs, or logos. And now apparently a Palestinian flag represents Palestine Action, which doesn't exist as a group anymore. Since this law was passed, over 70 activists have been arrested simply for holding signs stating, "I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action," including 4 Vikers, a lawyer, Vickers, a civil servant, a social worker, a mechanical engineer, the daughter of a Polish resistance fighter, and the veterans of the 1960s civil rights movement, including Eamon McCann, political activist, former politician and journalist, and Kate Nash, whose brother was killed on Bloody Sunday. It's a disgrace to all of these people. Now the UK state has gone even further and is accusing activists of supporting proscribed organizations simply for protesting the Israeli genocide in Gaza. So I'm going to go skip down to the bottom here because the last paragraph basically says it all. The UK's war on speech critical of Israel has continued and is even ramping up to new Orwellian lows. From threatening peaceful anti-genocide protesters to seizing journalist devices, it's clear the British state is fine with becoming a full-fledged autocracy in order to protect Israel. For no other reason than to protect Israel. So again, even though this is about the UK, fuck Israel. Because Israel is controlling the narrative, in this case too, in a third country. All right, but not just there. We've got another one. All right, but before we get to that, if you can and are able to, and it means, please support the media you want to see. That's our wall of fame. That's everyone that's hooked up our network with a tip. Best ways to do that, Cash App, $Indie News Network, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, paypal.me/Indie News Network, IndieNewsNow.com, and at the Substacks at INNnewsletter.com, again, where I linked that dissident article earlier in the week, and at IndieMediaToday.com, where we are live right now. Hi, everybody over on Substack. This other article I want to get to, I have not really seen anybody talking about, and I wanted to give this a little bit of time, so I'm disappointed we're a little bit behind schedule. But Alan McLeod, another Indie Media Award honoree from Mint Press News, another Indie Media Award honoree. Best of the best here, man. Go support these independent organizations. Alan's title, Rotten Apple. Dozens of former Israeli spies hired by the Silicon Valley giant. What do you mean? It's that Unit 8200 members. He says, Apple has made headlines in recent weeks for touting its commitment to privacy and human rights, rolling out tools to limit surveillance and spyware. But behind the corporate messaging lies a much darker reality. The company has quietly brought in dozens of veterans from Unit 8200. Israel's shadowy military intelligence unit known for blackmail, mass surveillance, and targeted killings. It's really weird that they're doing that in 2025 after Unit 8200 has been so instrumental in genocide. And yet they're bringing in the spies behind the genocide into Apple. Many of these hires took place as Israel escalated its war on Gaza and as CEO Tim Cook publicly expressed support for Israel while disciplining employees for pro-Palestinian expressions. You mean Tim Apple, according to Trump. Apple's deepening ties to Israel's most controversial intelligence raise uncomfortable questions not only about the company's political loyalties, but also about how it handles vast troves of personal user data. And how about these people getting access potentially to it and funneling it to Israel? There's no risk of that? A Mint Press News investigation has identified dozens of Unit 8200 operatives now working at Apple. The company's hiring spree coincides with growing scrutiny of its ties to the Israeli government, including its policy of matching employee donations to such groups as Friends of the IDF and the JNF, the Jewish National Fund, both of which play a role in the displacement of Palestinian people. Why are they doing this? The intense pro-Israel bias at the corporation has led many former and current employees to speak out. This investigation is part of a series examining the close collaboration between Unit 8200 and Western tech and media companies. All basically reported on by Allen. Previous investigations examined the links between Unit 8200 and social media giants like TikTok, which Reef and Jesse covered 2 years ago on INN News. Facebook, which I think we covered last year, and Google also. And also how former Unit 8200 spies are now responsible for writing much of America's news about Israel and Palestine and holding top jobs at outlets like CNN and Axios. I think we covered that one too. If not, Reef and Colin did.
Yeah.
So, Israel's international reputation has taken a severe hit amidst multiple spying scandals and ongoing attacks against its neighbors. During this same period, Apple has ramped up its recruitment of former Israeli intelligence personnel. It reminds me almost of how the U.S. went after the Nazi scientists after Nazi Germany. The Silicon Valley giant has hired dozens of former agents for the controversial Israeli intelligence outfit Unit 8200, raising questions about the corporation's political direction, to say the least. Nir Shkedi is among the most prominent examples. From 2008 to 2015, he served as a commander and chief of learning at Unit 8200, leading a team of approximately 120 operatives who developed new artificial intelligence tools to perform rapid data analysis. Unit 8200 is at the forefront of this technology and is known to have used AI to auto-generate kill lists of tens of thousands of Gazans, including children. These tools helped the IDF bypass what it called human targeting, or bottlenecks, and strike huge numbers of Palestinians. Shkedi has been a physical design engineer at Apple's Bay Area campus since 2022. So before October 7th. Again, remember, this didn't start October 7th. These guys were already in place. Right? He spent time at in Maynard, Massachusetts. Now he's in Sunnyvale, but he spent a lot of time in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
I wonder if his visa is going to be invalidated like the other people who support Palestine.
Oh.
Noah Gur is another senior Unit 8200 figure turned Apple employee. From 2015 to 2020, Gur rose to become a project manager and head of cybersecurity and big data development team at Unit 8200, where she, in her own words, invented creative technological solutions for high-priority intelligence goals and managed 2 strategically important cyber projects for the IDF. One of the most important cyber projects Unit 8200 has launched in recent times is the September pager attack on Lebanon, an act that injured thousands of civilians and was widely condemned as an act of international terrorism, including by former CIA Director Leon Panetta, who we think is a piece of shit. While Gur was not personally involved in that operation, Unit 8200 has spearheaded similarly nefarious actions for decades. In 2022, she was hired by Apple as a system-on-chip design engineer. And again, but she actually located in Israel. So she stayed in country because, of course, Apple has an office in Tel Aviv. And her only other experience, by the way, was with Unit 8200, as you can see. She has no other experience. They hired her right out of the IDF 8200 into Apple, and she has no other work experience.
Yep.
That's a problem. Eli Yavotitsky, go ahead.
Alan's talked about, pretty much the pipeline from intelligence right out of college, right, to, tech companies, like essentially just revolving door for all the intelligence agencies,
Right.
So they end up at Facebook and Meta, and I mean, all these tech companies. So
Eli Yazovitsky, meanwhile, was directly recruited from Unit 8200. Looks like she was too. In 2015, he left a high-powered 9-year career as a manager in the military unit to join Apple, where he rose to become an engineering manager. He's now since moved on to tech giant Qualcomm. They also make a ton of fucking cell phone chips, by the way. And guess who buys them? Apple. Unit 8200 is Israel's most elite and most controversial military intelligence unit. It serves as the backbone of both Israel's burgeoning tech sector and its repressive surveillance apparatus. See Where's Daddy and Lavender. The unit has developed cutting-edge technology like facial recognition and voice-to-text software to surveil, repress, and target Palestinians. The vast amounts of data gathered on the Palestinian population, including their medical history, sex lives, and search histories, have been used for coercion and extortion. That's coming here, by the way. If a certain individual needed to travel across checkpoints for crucial medical treatment, permission could be suspended until they complied. Information about extramarital affairs or sexual orientation, especially homosexuality, is exploited as blackmail material. But tell me how much Israel loves the LGBTQ community, right? One former Unit 8200 agent recalled that he was instructed during his training to memorize different Arabic words for gay so he could listen out for them in intercepted conversations. Internationally, Unit 8200 may be best known for its former, quote-unquote, because you never really leave the IDF, agents who created the notorious Pegasus software used by repressive governments around the world to spy on tens of thousands of prominent figures, including royals, heads of state, activists, and journalists. Among them, of course,
Palantir coming up.
Maybe. But among them was Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi, who was assassinated by Saudi operatives in Turkey in 2018. There were also potential links to CIA with him, too, allegedly. While military service is mandatory for Jewish Israelis, you end up in Unit 8200 by accident. Described as Israel's Harvard, parents spend fortunes on STEM-based extracurricular lessons for their children in hopes that they'll be selected to join the IDF's most elite and selective unit. Those chosen are rewarded with lucrative careers in the tech industry upon completion of their service, like all the people we're talking about here. Given Unit 8200's documented history of violence, espionage, and surveillance, both domestically and internationally, it's worth asking whether tech giants should be hiring its alumni in such large numbers. Do you think there might be a problem there? Getty, Gore, and Yazovitsky are the most high-profile example, but they are far from alone. A closer look reveals that dozens of other Unit 8200 veterans have also secured key roles at Apple in engineering and hardware design. Again, 2022. It looks like they hired a bunch of people in 2022. And now they've been there 3 years throughout this genocide. You think they might have been suppressing the narrative a little bit in the hallways? Then you have in software and cybersecurity. This person was there since 2021. Okay, served as in 2020, between 2012 and 2016, and rose to a project manager during the assault on Gaza in 2016. Hired in 2023. Guy Levy, another former intelligence analyst, now works as a software engineer. And we know what former intelligence analysts who moonlight as software engineers are actually doing. They're fucking spies. And then you've got the AI people, all right? Avital Kleinman, a 6-year veteran of Unit 8200, is now a machine learning algorithm engineer at Apple. You don't see any potential conflict of interest there, but you're expelling Chinese nationals? How? They have already been caught spying on us. Niv Lev Ari, currently a validation engineer, notes in his LinkedIn profile that he received a letter of commendation from Unit 8200 Commander Aviv Kochavi for his work in the unit. Then you've also got other technical roles. Okay, you've got an intelligence specialist, now in design verification engineering. You've got Gil Avniel, who spent over 5 years in the unit serving as a network engineer. The growing number of former Israeli intelligence operatives working at Apple doesn't seem to concern the company's senior management. CEO Tim Apple is known to strongly hold pro-Israel views and has spearheaded the Silicon Valley giant's collaboration with the Israeli state. Yes, I know I said Tim Apple. I was joking around because his name's Tim Cook, and Trump called him Tim Apple very famously in a meeting in 2017. Apple has acquired several Israeli tech firms and now operates 3 centers in the country, employing around 2,000 people. In 2014, Cook invited Israeli war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu to the company headquarters in Cupertino, where in front of the cameras, the two openly embraced. So when are we bringing up Tim Cook on the Hague charges for capitulating to all of Israel's demands on behest of a war criminal? The following year, Cook accepted an invitation from President Reuven Rivlin to visit Israel. So he made the trip, and I'm sure he made the pilgrimage, and he kissed the wall. It's a great privilege to host you and your team here, Rivlin said. Even for me, as one who prefers to write with a pen and paper, it's clear what a great miracle you've created when I looked at my staff and my grandchildren. He didn't create shit. Tim Cook didn't create shit. He was an executive. He's a manager.
Wait, why did he say his grandkids, too? That's the other thing.
Right?
He's making family with these people.
Well, not just that, but he's talking about his grandkids all have iPhones and iPads and everything else. Effusive praise for the Apple CEO has also come in the form of honors from pro-Israel organizations. So they've been kissing his ass for years. In 2018, the ADL presented Cook with its inaugural Courage Against Hate Award and its Never Is Now Summit on Anti-Semitism and Hate, where the organization described him as a visionary leader in the business community. Fucking garbage. In the wake of the October 7th attacks, Cook sent out a company-wide email expressing his solidarity with Israel. Quote, like so many of you, I'm devastated by the horrific attacks in Israel. He wasn't devastated by them murdering 233 Palestinians in 230 days prior to October 7th. No, he didn't give a fuck. And the tragic reports coming out of the region. My heart goes out to the victims. You mean the ones that were murdered by the IDF? Those who've lost loved ones. And all the innocent people who are suffering as a result of this violence. Violence perpetrated by Israel. Violence ignored and allowed by Israel that monitored that every inch of that fucking wall, and somehow they had no idea what was happening for hours? Really? Mm-hmm. You're still gonna go for that? Oh, okay. Yet, according to Apple's For Ceasefire, which is a group of former and current employees opposing Israeli actions in Gaza, he has yet to say anything publicly about the mass devastation caused by the Israeli response to October 7th. Huh, how convenient. Indeed, the Silicon Valley Corporation has a policy of matching employee donations to groups such as Friends of the IDF, which raises money to buy equipment for IDF soldiers, and the JNF, an organization that participates in the theft and destruction of Palestinian land. Under Cook's leadership, Apple employees have been disciplined or even fired for wearing pins, bracelets, or keffiyehs in support of the Palestinian people. I wonder how many Palestinians work there. I'm guessing not many. Nevertheless, groups such as Apple's For Ceasefire continue to speak out about what they describe as Apple's complicity in genocide. All right. There's a whole other thing about the unit of 8200 tech takeover and how it's not just Apple. All right. Among them is Axios correspondent Barak Ravid. That's a propagandist whose Middle Eastern coverage won him the prestigious White House Press Correspondence Award. Until at least 2023, he was a member of Unit 8200. CNN also hired at least 2 former agents to produce their news coverage, right? And that's so that, again, it's not just Apple. It's unthinkable that former intelligence agents of Hezbollah or Iran's Ministry of Intelligence or Russia's FSB or GRU would be hired en masse and trusted with our most sensitive data. Yet when it comes to Israel, the answer is different. Many of these employees are not even former agents and are directly recruited from Unit 8200 while still in active service, despite Israeli law explicitly prohibiting the group's members from identifying themselves or divulging their alliances. Unreal.
Oopsies.
Thus, in this light, it appears that those like Apple's for ceasefire, struggling to end the company's double standards, are fighting an uphill battle. Alan is as good as it gets. Again, go subscribe to Mint Press News, support Alan McLeod, follow him. He's everywhere. Telegram, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. I do have a quick lightning round, 4 things to get to very quickly. We're just past midnight. We're going to get to it very quickly. Before we do, if you're able to, and it means support the media you want to see, thank you so much. These people already do. Cash App, $, Indie News Network. co-fi.com/Indie News Network. PayPal.me/Indie News Network. At IndieNewsNow.com, there's a section to keep the media free. You can donate there. Or you can go to INNnewsletter.com or IndieMediaToday.com. Subscribe on a monthly or on a annual basis as well. You can sign up for a year. I see a bunch of people in chat. Good to see everybody here. Real quick, let's get to some of the lightning round. Lightning round. You know, this came up. I was talking with my friend Descent in Bloom about FOIAs, and she was talking about how she submitted a couple of FOIAs about the Election Assistance Commission. And I found this come across my desk. It's a Substack called Open the Books, right? And Open the Books talks about transparency between government and media. So what he says, what they say here is 40 months, the eternal FOIA backlog. So it is illegal for the, for the government to ignore a FOIA request, right? It's written as law. Right. However, it's not written as law that they have to staff this division adequately. So one of the key commitments of the Trump admin is to find enormous efficiencies in federal spending by rooting out waste, fraud, abuse, and self-dealing. But in order for those changes to be enduring, the feds must also radically improve transparency when it comes to public records requests. Here we go. According to new data obtained by Open the Books, FOIA requests last year that were labeled complex had an average response time of 267 days across 416 agencies. Simple requests took an average of 39 days for an initial response, but 31 agencies still took in excess of 100 days on average. But worse is that here we go. FOIA of 1996, Americans have the right to access documents created by the government bureaucracy, emails, text messages, meetings, rules, regulations. If USAspending.gov can show taxpayers how their money was spent, FOIA requests are the key to understanding how the administrative state is spending their time on our dime. So what it basically says was these right now are the average wait times under FOIA. Commerce Department, 836 days. You're waiting 2.5 years for a response, and the response could be completely redacted. The EAC, 266 days. You're going to wait almost a year. Right? And this was just Administration for Children and Families from HHS. They cite a couple of examples here. Definitely read this article. It's really important to understand that the Doge team could start by updating the FOIA legacy software, which is slow and out of date. Okay, but they don't want to do that. They don't want FOIAs to be executed because that gives people receipts. They don't like people having receipts. Openthebooks.substack.com. Go check that one out on the 40-month backlog. Next, not going to scroll through or read this one, but look at this headline. Summer sewage spills and swimming advisories from our friend and Indie Media Award honoree Erin Brockovich for the Brockovich Report. What you need to know about pollution in the water this summer. All right. What happens when a refreshing dip becomes a health hazard? RFK goes swimming, right? With his grandkids. Across the country, sewage spills and overflows are forcing communities to issue swimming advisories that can turn a sunny day on the water into a public health concern. Or they just shut down the beach like you see here. Unreal.
Yep.
Then I also wanted to mention from Descent in Bloom, like I said, she's been covering more than just the election story. She's also been covering the Venezuelan migrant story when it comes to CCOT, the people who've been illegally abducted. One of her first cases was this gentleman, Richard Duarte Rodriguez. All right. She says, fantastic breaking news. This was Friday night. We have confirmation that Richard Duarte Rodriguez was on the second flight out of CCOT to Venezuela. He's out of CCOT, out of the cage. For the first time in months, the wind touched his face. He's clothed again, not stripped down to underwear like an animal. He can breathe without the stench of terror pressed against his skin. She says, Richard, you were one of the first people I ever wrote about, and now I'm crying. The last time I saw you, you were behind the bars of a Salvadorian hellhole, flashing the international symbol for distress while Matt Gaetz strutted through CCOT like it was a zoo. What was done to you wasn't just unjust. It was a crime, a human rights violation. And even though you're free now, she will never stop holding the United States accountable for what it did, for the abuse, for the lies, for disappearing him during a routine check-in and sending him to a terrorist prison, thinking no one would notice. But they were wrong. His best friend noticed. His auntie noticed. And because they noticed, she did too. He was one of her first cases, one of the first names she etched into the bones of this work. She'll never forget him. And she hopes that one day they'll meet, not in a courtroom, not in a cage, but in a better world, one she intends to help build. She's fucking awesome. And this was the article she had written back in April about Richard Duarte Rodriguez, if you want to read that. All right. Then also we've got, I'm not going to read this one again. I'll show the beginning and the end from The Dissident, who we read an article from earlier about the UK. He wrote this article. We've been talking about Bellingcat and reading his articles about Bellingcat for years. A new show whitewashes the CIA propaganda outlet Bellingcat. So Bellingcat was much more effective a couple of years ago. They have since dwindled in their presence. But he starts by saying a new TV show has premiered this month called The Collective, The Deadly Game of Citizen Journalism, which purports to be based on a true story, with its description basically describing what these guys, embellishing what Bellingcat did. The outlet Budapest Reporter wrote that the show is inspired by the real-life exploits of the investigative journalist group Bellingcat, which we call Bellingcrap. The show's trailer portrays a brave group of investigative journalists risking their lives to tell the truth about conscientious international incidents. The real story, however, on Bellingcat is far different. All right. The real Bellingcat is a shadowy propaganda outlet funded by the CIA's meddling arm, the NED, which puts out pseudo-scientific reports laundering the CIA's version of contentious events. In this article, he'll go over the real story of Bellingcat, which, again, go read that. And then at the very end, he concludes by saying that while Bellingcat's influence has dwindled significantly in recent years, and it is often not mentioned anymore in mainstream media, this ridiculous show whitewashing the outlet's actual legacy calls for a critical examination of what the outlet actually represented and did. So I thought it was really important to do that and to pay attention to that. Like I said, I also published a Substack post. This is really about people who live stream to Substack. It's very specific, Indies Tech Tips about how to convert that live stream to a published post once it's been completed, because it puts it in as a draft, doesn't automatically publish it to the Substack. So when you see this live stream published to Indie Media Today, I have to manually do that after this stream is over. It doesn't automatically happen. And this walks people through that process, appending the email, appending the post, emailing it out, the whole thing. Now, I promised last week that I would have an update on our friend Andrew Zygmunt Smith's daughter, Anna Marie. I asked him to do so. He's promised that he would. He said, we've been home from proton treatment for about a month. Today, Anna Marie's getting her first set of follow-up MRIs. Her vision's pretty much gone, but she still has the same warrior spirit and unshakable smile. Thank you to everyone who keeps her in their prayers. And there is Andrew with his daughter, Anna Marie. Smiling, happy, beautiful girl. What a fucking shame. Fuck cancer. Again, this is their GoFundMe. They've raised $6,600. We're going to put the link in the description at the Substack afterwards, so please go and support if you're able to, please. Also, Oz the Boomer could use a couple of bucks if you have it. co-fi.com/OzTheBoomer. And we love Oz. Oz is great. I don't know if everybody watched Beauty and the Boomer last night. Great show. They were back for the first time in a couple of weeks. Yes, we all do. And then we've got Halo Benson's daughter, Aspen, who is facing devastating charges after a trip gone wrong. She needs to raise $30,000 for her defense, or she faces 30 plus years in prison. Her GoFundMe also will be posted. She just crossed the $1,100 mark. And again, thank you to everyone who's helped donate some money to help Aspen fight these unjust charges. Want to mention IndieNewsNow.com, where we are live, but it's also the news website where you can see all different content from across independent media. And that Undead FOIA guy, you know, the Sleuth News, outstanding publication. We brought that one about they talk about backlogs and submitting FOIAs all the time. We've got anti-war, Substacks, Rumble videos. We've got a bunch of different stuff for you to check out over here at IndieNewsNow.com. You can also, again, keep the news free. And this is where you can put any dollar amount and pay either with Amazon, Cash App, Ko-fi, Google Pay, not Ko-fi, Google Pay, etc. Put in a credit card directly here through Stripe. That's our old merch store. Our new merch store is over here at IndieNewsShop.itemorder.com. Buy my merch, little bitch.
Buy my merch right quick.
Right. Thank you. That somebody did buy, I think it was Bad Cookies, bought an indie t-shirt with the tuxedo, with the tie. I love it. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. Again, IndieNewsShop.itemorder.com. Okay. That's all I had. So one more time before we go, support the independent media that you want to see. Support INN. These people already have. Thank you so much for doing so. $sign Indie News Network over at Cash App. ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. PayPal.me/Indie News Network. At IndieNewsNow.com, which I just showed you. Over at INNNewsletter.com. And at my Substack, IndieMediaToday.com, where all the clips from this show get published. The live stream goes out, and I write tech tips and other articles as well. Okay. Sorry, that ran a little bit long. I had a feeling it might. But we got boats coming up. So everybody head over to the Ocho, INN8 The Ocho. That's youtube.com/@INN8 The Ocho, rumble.com/C/INN8 The Ocho. We'll also be at INNnewsletter.com. And then we'll be on the other INN channels on Kick, on Twitch, on Twitter, and everywhere else. All right. I'm sorry I didn't get to chat much. I love you all, and I thank you for being here. Y'all are the best. Support independent media because we need it more than ever, and we'll see you soon, fam.
We'll see you in a bit.
Mwah. Ciao, baby. Bye, Felicia.
No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I Suspended disbelief and swallowed pride. I thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry.
My favorite songs don't hit the same way. I get to the end of a 4-minute track and I'm only looking back thinking, what did they actually say?
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days, and I still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to say. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe?